All right, we are on air. It is Thursday, September 24th, and we're here to do a design check-in for Backdrop CMS. Nate, you're going to kick it off.
Sure. So, so we like to get together every 2 weeks and talk about design, uh, everything design related in the project and around the project. And the first area that we're going to talk about this week is Backdrop the product and some areas in which we're making some headway or would like to make some headway. As most people probably know, 1.2 came out actually since our last design meeting. So 1.2 is now out, and 1.3 is our next release, which is where most of our design work probably will be focused. 1.3 actually is intended to be just a UX release. We're just working on polishing this release rather than adding major new modules or major new features, which often means redesigning some of our UIs or just expanding them out so that they're friendlier and possibly redesigning some things that haven't been fully converted yet, things like that. So we've got three major systems, and all three of them kind of need a UI overhaul. Maybe not an overhaul, but some improvements. Layouts, views, and fields. And of those UIs, Field UI is probably the worst off because it's the oldest UI, and it kind of was rushed to get put into Drupal 7 and hasn't really ever seen any love or changes ever since. So Field UI is the most important one, and Wes, who's joined us this week, has done some work on that, which looks really pretty exciting. Wes, do you want to give a rundown on kind of your thought process here? This is issue 779 for anybody wanting to follow along later.
Yeah, do you have a link actually handy, or I can dig it
Yeah,
up?
let me see. I do. Copy. I'll paste this into the Hangout chat. It's also in the. It's also in the agenda.
I'm not that organized.
Okay. I'll post the agenda link too. There
Cool.
you go.
All right, so sharing my screen here. So a while back, we had some good thoughts from QuickBox, and he had ideas around iconography and moving things around, and I liked kind of where his mind was at, and I also steal a lot from. Borrow from if this then that. Whenever I think of a complicated form, if this then that is by far one of the most complicated forms I've ever seen, but I don't dislike using it. So I think they've done something rather good. So I kind of went through an if this then that flow just to remind myself, and so then tried to break down from a user's perspective. Okay, I have this, and I'm trying to do this. So I started with the add field. Screen. So first I think of, okay, what kind of data content do I have? And I tried to break that down into very basic groups that in the way the user would think about it, not necessarily how we store it or how it's handled on the technical side. So entity reference probably isn't the best term, but I wanted to kind of group all those as one thing, even if the way we store it, we can only target one type of entity or whatever. So that's the first step, and then I just added a little green line there to show you kind of where you're at. And the next screen, it's okay, I've chosen text, and then I kind of worked with the wording a bit, and I landed on an editor interface. So when you're filling out, making a new node, I think that's how people might think of it. And then I wanted to just show what that looks like. So it's kind of like the Denny's menu, when you're maybe not feeling so hot in the morning and you go there and you're like, I want that one. So it just has kind of pictures and representations of what you are
Oh,
gonna get.
I see what you're saying. Is that so? These are actually all options for how you want your widget to be displayed. I thought that you were
Right.
just kind of pulling up some just mocking up some example, not examples,
No,
but
yeah, I
this is
was.
a configuration form. But you're
Yeah,
saying this is actually selection
yeah. So
choice.
these are just aesthetic. These aren't actual. This isn't actually a radio button. This isn't actually a checkbox. They're just aesthetic like things to like. Oh, I want that one. Like this is the Denny's menu thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then it's maybe a little clearer here where you've chosen radio button and it's highlighted. You know, kind of like this one. And then you would get scrolled down. If you were on mobile, and this was one column, you'd get scrolled down to editor interface once you chose text. I was also thinking if you're like hovering over this side, it pops up the widgets here. Like they're already in the DOM. You just kind of show the one that's active, and that way people from the old system might have a better idea of like how this is flowing, and then people who maybe aren't as sure what kind of data they have once they see like on the right what it looks like the Denny's menu, that they'll be more confident in their choice. And the other idea I had is like at no point when you select any of these options, none of this submits. None of it starts like the multi-step form right now is kind of like you take a step and you kind of can't take some steps back, like you've already gone far enough that something's written in hard clay.
Yep.
So my idea is it doesn't actually, until you do create field at the bottom, nothing's actually written to config or anything. It's just all here. So then, in order that we don't lose any progress, I was thinking we could probably do like write the form state to their session until it's submitted. So if something happens, it's saved. So then we select a radio button. So then I was all right. Then there's kind of the options of okay, I want to do a human name, machine name. I might want to change the order. And I was thinking, you know, these are kind of like the ridges on a physical device that you might drag around. It's something they use in iOS. I kind of like it. And then the hand cursor, we could do like a grabby hand.
Yeah. Have you seen Options Element module by chance?
I have not.
There actually is a port, but I'm going to link to dribble.org because I have a screenshot.
Cool.
Options Elements.
Yeah, and then required field I stuck up there because it kind of felt like it belonged with that more than other things. And also I feel like it generally gets lost in the current UI. People should know that it's an option, hopefully, like new users should know it's an option, but it's also, I added like a little line to the bottom because I think some people are like, yeah, I always want this, but they don't realize the repercussions of it sometimes. Like you can't save a draft if you have something required and the user doesn't have it yet. So then editor interface again, so this is the stuff the editor will end up seeing, so label, help text, etc. And then I also wanted to have this default value section be populated dynamically as you type stuff in here.
Which is possible.
Cool.
Just
so
AJAX requests, yeah.
Right.
Well, I think,
it could
actually.
It could be two-way binding. I mean, it just has to be done in the display, right? And then when we send it, we have the values. We know it's a valid value. We just have to make sure that nothing got mangled somehow in the DOM.
We might need to come up with something kind of clever, like which I don't like. I don't like clever. But because right now Backdrop needs the field definition to already exist before it can like show you a widget form or something like that. So actually having it render the backend version of a widget and validating a backend version of a field before that field actually exists, it's going to take a little bit of work. Because right now those fields actually need to really have already been created because of, like you say, that as soon as you create a new field, then immediately it starts to exist and it's just populated with a bunch of defaults, and then it just kind of takes you through the rest of the steps to configure it as you like. But as soon as you select a field and save its field settings, then it's like it now exists, even though it's not really configured.
Sure. I was thinking more of like whenever I see a Angular demo or whatever, it just like pumps a bunch of HTML in, and then it does the two-way binding thing. So as you type, it does things. And I don't think we needed to have it like as I type a character, it shows up down here. But like as whenever they exit the field, it updates down here.
Yeah.
On blur or whatever it's called. So that was my thought. And it wouldn't necessarily have to be something that came out of like the form API or I don't know. But you're right, it is clever. And if they don't have JavaScript, this would end up being a multi-step form, in which case this would be a lot more straightforward.
Yeah. Yeah, normally what we do, anywhere that, yeah, we have like the, um, non-enhanced version, there's usually a button in certain places that you click and that goes to the next step. And in
Right.
the Ajaxified version of things, we just click that button for you, basically, as you proceed down the form or blur
Mm.
out or something like that. Then we just
Mm-hmm.
bind a blur handler and then we click the button automatically and then Ajax loads instead.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, all of that sounds pretty good. What do you think about this field selection type? It looks like this is pretty literal. Like maybe you'd even let the browser render a radio button and a checkbox in a select list. Is that what you're thinking, or are you thinking more like an image representation of these things?
Whatever works better. I mean, there might be cases like the user needs to be able to click anywhere on here. Oops, of course I'm zooming out. Needs to be able to click anywhere on here, and then it selects that you want a select list. So if the select list widget makes that a pain, maybe it shouldn't be a select list. But
Hmm.
ideally, yeah, I would want it to look like whatever their browser and operating system would render that as.
Well, this isn't. I mean, so we also need to think about like what happens when this expands out to other data types too, because
Mm-hmm.
there are really complicated data types that have data entry things that we don't want rendered.
What do
So,
you
like,
mean?
if you were going to set up like a inline entity form or something, for example,
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to render the whole inline entity form in the editor interface. So I think an image is probably the way to go
Yeah.
for those more complicated.
Yeah, or like a more direct example would be like a link field, right? A link field has like up to like 5 options. That's like the text field, the title field, the checkbox for like the rel
Yeah,
attribute. There's all this, just
well,
all
an
of this
inline
stuff.
entity form could have hundreds, right? And that's just a user or node reference or whatever. And so you're
Yeah,
getting
and
reference, and then now you've got a mess over here.
with link, I don't think you have alternate widgets though, right?
No, there's not. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's another thing. It's like what happens if you don't have a widget to be selected?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do
Yep.
we skip that step somehow,
Well, you do
or?
have a default like in the in the in the code. And so what we could do is say like if there's only one and it's the default, skip this step, show them what they're getting, but like don't make it a question, just move on to the next.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or just have the first option selected all the time, so that when they click,
Default.
like even like on text, right? You click on text and it defaults to short text, and then the form down below has already been populated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if it wasn't clear, another thing this kind of abstracts, like if you're doing text versus a number, both of those could be, a list, which in the current UI is, or maybe it's not a great example, but they're like I think I'm abstracting the first two steps here are abstracting something that's more directly mapped to the data, how we store it, than,
Hmm.
and this is I'm trying to map it more to how a user might understand it.
Yeah. We
Um,
struggle with that a lot just because people don't think about things the way the code was written for them.
right.
And I think we are going to need to rework that like philosophically a little bit, like to try
Right.
and make the user interface match the mental model and not the data model. I think that's totally fine. I think like this will force us to do it. Like if we think about like okay, what goes here, then it's like okay, well what data type is this? Oh, it's not a list data type, it's a number data type, and then we'll have to rework the code to match that, which I think is fine.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking if the code was that way for some really good reason, because databases are blah, then like we really just have to understand if they select this, and this, then this is how we store that, and this is what that ends up looking like on the data side. And like there might be cases, like let's say entity reference, on the widget side, it would say, you want autocomplete or do you want a select list or whatever. But then like I think I don't really understand how that's stored. But from what from what it seems like, you would also have to require that it only targets one kind of entity, which we could take care of in field options. So
Yeah,
like you might not really know what you're going to be storing until field options are filled out.
yeah.
Hmm.
And that's kind of how it is now, only you don't know that there are field options, so I still think this is better because at least you understand, like, you have more choices in the future. You're not done with this form. So.
Well, I think currently it's like you could have node reference and taxonomy reference and, like, whatever random entity reference, and it's more literal to how it's stored, which I think was very confusing for me. When I got into 7 and I was doing that kind of stuff, that was annoying.
Yeah. I'm also not entirely sure, this is a I'm going into a rabbit hole here. I'm not entirely sure we want entity reference for Backdrop. I spent a bunch of time working on porting it and then porting references module, which had already been ported, which was a little sad. But anyway, the last week, and I kept getting stuck in the way the entity reference worked. And even though I like the end result, like I like the user interface of the way entity reference works, the code is very different from most of Backdrop's code, and I don't think that it's the right model. But it would be great to see if we could figure out how to take what we like from using entity reference and put that into the user interface here.
Yep. I'm more using it as like we would need to decide how we talk about when you have a field that points to another entity or whatever. Yeah, thing. Like,
well, I think,
so
the first problem is we can't use the word entity in the user interface.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, what do you call? I think entity is like maybe the quote unquote technically correct term, but like.
I was just thinking about calling it a reference, and then in the next step, when you decide what you're referencing, we can just tell them, like, literally what they're referencing, and we don't even have to mention the noun.
Right.
But we'll see.
Like maybe you want a block. Maybe we can get blocks in a field. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So some other things, Wes. I think that I think the literal representations might not fly here.
Okay.
Maybe we want something like the layout selection form where there's a graphic representation that's maybe a little bit abstract, and then a label below each one. That way, something like you could represent radio buttons is usually not one radio button, right? It's usually multiple. So that way you could represent that in a way that might take up. It would be a predictable amount of space too. So each option would be given the same amount of precedence.
Yep. And I think and I chose the easiest one to, like, text is going to be the easiest options to represent. So like this might not have worked even. Yeah.
Yeah. That's another crazy idea. This is something we've talked about in a separate issue. We've been talking about flipping the widget so that the widget comes first and then the data type comes second. So the first thing you would select would be text field, and then after that it would be like what kind of text field. And that text field could be a date, a number, or text, or whatever. And so you choose the widget first, and then you choose the data type second. But there's some other problems with that, in that some specialized things like link, there's only one type of data that associates with that, and other things like you'd end up with like date pop-up, for example, and 9 times out of 10 people would select date pop-up if they wanted to make a date field, because it was the only date-like field that was displayed as a widget, and they might not know that they could also select the text field and also enter the data type as being date there, right?
Right.
So there's some other issues with that.
I'm not sure that one would, because it seems like putting the cart before the horse. Like, it does sound nice from a user perspective, but then, like, I think you would make it easier to make mistakes, like you're saying. Like, you're talking. You first need to decide what you're trying to store before you decide the container. Like, if you think of a literal sense, like if it's water, I'm gonna get a bucket. If it's like a bunch of action figures, I'm gonna maybe still use a bucket. I don't know.
Also, most people don't think about their content types by the form either. So we'd also talked about, rather than showing them an editor interface, which is like the last step, show them the actual thing they're creating. So, like, show them a string of text or a paragraph of text.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Like, what if when people when a core or a module creates a field type, if they create like a demo default value that we could use to
that
do
we can
exactly
render.
that.
Yeah. But that
Um,
also makes it really complicated because you need not only the data, but also the data type in order to actually render it. And the editors, like, you can swap that at any time. But
Yeah,
I don't
there's some
know.
really hard problems with that. Like,
Yeah.
how do you represent an entity reference, like in text,
It depends on the widget. That's another thing we haven't talked about is like there's also 100 different ways to render the data too. Like is it a comma separated list of links or is it just a plain text field or is it a rendered entity? You
Yeah.
know. So it's a hard problem to solve.
right. Yeah, I think it's something that I'd like to just start mocking things up and feeling out what actually works. I feel like
Yeah.
talking about it, you just get overwhelmed.
Yeah, I do also like the visual representation of things here, which we don't have now. Now it's just like use words for things, and people sometimes have no idea what they actually want.
Right.
But if you can show them, either through a graphic or a rendered item or whatever, that makes a lot more sense. I am a little bit concerned about, Nate, you mentioned providing the same amount of space for each item, but I don't think that'll map to anyone's mental model because a text field and a body field are not the same amount of space on the page. And I think that might be really disconcerting to people if you have a text field that's huge or a paragraph field that's tiny. They're not going to, if we are doing a visual representation, it does need to actually match the visual representation of the thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like if you use Form Builder module or if you've ever used Wufoo or whatever, they're all just like, one thing, you drag it in and they're all the same size.
But they aren't visual representations of what you get. There's like an icon and a word.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I'm suggesting, is that we have an icon and a word.
Oh. Well, I'm not sure. I mean, it depends on what the icons are, but I'm not sure that's any better than just a word.
Yeah. Might have to mock it up.
Yeah.
I forgot Wufoo exists. That would be a good... Is there anything else like this we could borrow from?
Well, since I have a survey website...
Oh, yeah. There's that.
Hang on, somehow I got muted. Okay. There's an example on webform.com. You can just go to webform.com/demo, I think.
You want to share your screen?
Oh, it's actually... Yeah, sure. Actually, that line...
Oh, yeah.
Desktop. Okay. So...
My giant face.
So this is Form Builder. This is what I was saying, where it's like icon, and maybe the icon can be a lot larger than these guys are, but you have these representations of. Yeah, sorry, that kind of blows out there a little bit.
I can like live demos.
That's that issue I told you about where I solved it in the vertical tabs pull list. There's a stupid value on Firefox and Safari that you have to specifically call out on certain elements because they refuse.
I don't think it used to do this.
If it's the bug I'm thinking of, it always did it.
Maybe I never used it in
certain
browser.
browsers.
Yeah.
It has to be Firefox or Safari. Everyone else is like, W3C spec nothing.
Yeah.
And I agree with them, but oh well.
So anyway, the like things like a hidden field, it's just like a grayed out box or something like that. And these might be, I don't know. I mean, there's a icon representation that's kind of really simple, and maybe these icons could be a lot bigger because the space that we have in this new interface is a lot larger. And this was all kind of designed for, a desktop interface with a cursor, and I think that these days you'd end up with something much larger that would be kind of finger friendly.
Yeah.
I think what makes this work though is that even though you have no idea what that icon means, as soon as you drag in that element, you do get a visual representation of that field. So you get instant feedback. You're like, oh, that's not what I wanted, and you can do it again.
Yeah, well, maybe that's what we could do then in Wes's mock-up is make it so that the first thing you see when you select something is the default value form, something that renders a preview. So that way, as you're clicking in between the different icons, then you get representations of those things right away.
Yeah, that would definitely work. because then we would have the problem with the space being solved with the same amount of stuff, but then you still have the visual feedback as to what the thing is that you added.
Yeah, the way all of these things work isn't by like at a glance, it's not showing you exactly what it is, but it makes it fast enough that you can try a lot of things really quickly to figure out which one you want.
And one thing, this is a crazy idea too, just to make it twice as hard, one thing we could do too is if we had a visual representation of the form element, but also a visual representation of the rendered data. So when you dragged in like a body field, you would get a text area on the left and then a paragraph of text on the right. So you would get feedback from both of those things.
And here's options element too, by the way. It's installed on webform.com. So you go over here to options, and it's got these. Yeah, and you can add more items. And then as you type them, it does kind of the Ajax-y, like updating.
Oh, yeah, so you're kind of solving a couple problems at once. The default.
Yeah, so you can change the default, and you can change the order. And you can like remove items in the middle. And there's also like this, let's see, there's some, here you go, customize keys. So if you wanted to set the machine value separate, so you can hide
that's a good option to hide.
Yeah, and then if you want, I usually leave it that, most people don't care what the internal representation is. But then this maps back to the way CCK works right now. And actually, like, default value is even, like, you can actually even type that out. So
I would really like to get rid of that kind of the way the manual entry work, where it's like, here's a text box and separate it by pipes. That's
very, very Drupal-y, and it's horrible.
Yes.
The one advantage of this, and the reason why I left it on webform.com, is because if you wanted to copy and paste a list of values, if you wanted to quickly get a list from someplace else, then it's handy.
I think it's definitely valuable, considering our primary target audience are people coming from Drupal. They're going to have, like, I'm building a new site that's in Drupal 6 right now. I often just edit the field and copy that giant massive glob and then drop it in the new site and then call it done. And I think that there's definitely value in that, but I would love to, like, not have to expose people who don't know Drupal or Backdrop to that weird, like, enter a key and then a vertical pipe and then a value. It's just like,
what if we made it so you could toggle like a view of the config? You know what I mean? Like we're popping out JSON in the end, right? So like we could have a way. So then like you have not only the options, you have everything. And like the people who know that well can do it, and everyone else will just ignore it. So like I was thinking as you were explaining, like having a view of what it'll actually look like what if this was a 2-column design, and the left column was the setting, and when you selected one, it would move, the left column would move and get you to the next one, and you could go back up, and the right column's the preview, but then maybe there's a tab and it's like the preview or the config code, and you could flip-flop.
I like that. I feel like maybe the config code, that might be like a devel add-on.
Yeah.
Because it's a little bit more sophisticated, but I really like the the ability for people who know JSON to be able to like work with that. I'm not sure I want to encourage new users to like, oh, just change the code. I feel like that might be a bad habit to create in people.
Sure.
Yeah, unfortunately, like the JSON representations of stuff isn't nearly as pretty as you might want to believe. Like, there's just so many options that it can get overwhelming pretty quickly. And sometimes it gets a little cryptic, like numbers are used because it's like a constant. So, like, instead of using a string that you would be able to understand, it's like 6. And you're like, what the hell is 6? And it's like, oh, well, that's, disable validation option, obviously,
Well, that's okay.
Not perfect for human reading.
The other thing that came up that I thought was interesting was there was a request to be able to add multiple fields at once. And the comment that this might push us farther from that. And I'm not sure I completely understand the use case, but it made me think, like, okay, if it's what I'm thinking of, then maybe it's power usery, and maybe that's not invalid, but maybe it's a contrib feature, like you're talking about putting that in devel.
Well, I think like
so it'd be interesting to think of both cases.
I am kind of a bit of a power user, but it is
Yeah.
really slow to create a content type if all you need to do is add like 8 uh, text fields onto it, right? Where every single time after you add the text field, you click save, and then you click OK, OK, OK on every subsequent form, and you don't change any values anywhere. And you're like, why am I clicking OK 3 times just to add another field? And if we had the ability to like add it and then be done, and then, or even in that form, you could go drag, drop, drag, drop, drag, drop, and then type in all 3 key, form item labels or whatever, and click save. We don't need all the confirmation all the way through if we actually set intelligent defaults, and we don't need, like, we could find some way to like do that all at once. And I think that if we can do the intelligent configuration options, that could still be valid even with this model, where you could like drag in text field 1, drag in text field 2, drag in text field 3, save. We just need to figure out like where the drag is or where the click happens that lets you skip all of the next set of steps. Like you just say like accept or something and then continue before the thing gets saved.
Okay. Yeah, kind of like webform.com was doing. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. Although I'm not totally sure. Like, webform.com is like widget driven, where it's like you choose the radio buttons or the checkboxes. And that's only possible because webform doesn't really have any data types. It just saves it all as text. So, I'm not sure that we could do that. Like, I think that you're on the right path here. That that you choose the data type first, and as long as you can get through the process of choosing a data type, choosing a widget, and seeing a preview like as quickly as possible, then I think that this is going to be fine.
Well, I also think like there is some like it is a little backwards to make people start with data type. So if we can find a way to do that that makes sense, would be good. The widget is weird right now in Drupal and Backdrop because sometimes you can't change the widget after the fact, but I don't really know why. Like it seems like it shouldn't matter.
You should always be able to change the widget because the widget is not a representation of the data. It's just merely the way you enter it. So you should always, always, always be able to change the widget.
I think there are some cases where you choose something that Drupal considers a data type, but as a user might not feel like a data type, and then the widget becomes locked in stone. Like I think like maybe a Boolean is a single checkbox, and like why can't I have other checkboxes if this ended up not being Boolean? Like something like that.
Yep. Yeah, because your data type is Boolean, so you can never change that to be multiple checkboxes. Yeah.
Right. That's maybe not the example that trips people up, but I've had that same thing.
And I think that if we can try and figure out like what that problem is, and I mean maybe that's a much bigger issue of just like including some kind of migration path and letting people change their data, but understand that if you change it, you have to like run the script that'll fix everything for you. Which might not be a core problem. That could be a contrib problem. But if we could figure out how to solve that, then I think like letting people start with a widget is fine, because then if they make the wrong choice and they get done, they can change the widget.
Mm-hmm. Did anyone else look at Serendipity's Google Doc? I thought that was really cool.
No, I don't. Could you post the link?
Yeah, sure. It's in that same thread that I posted those mock-ups, and I will share my screen here and try to talk through what I think he was doing. But he typed up a pretty good document. So it was basically he's borrowing similar syntax and metaphors from the page layout UI as like the kind of node entity UI. This would work. I think it's we're more talking about managed display.
Yeah.
So yeah, you would have blocks which could hold fields, and so it's kind of like a field group in modern or in current parlance. And then from what I understand, you might have a bunch of different blocks with fields in them. So like you could have
or it could be like a view.
A view?
Yeah, you put like 4 fields in a view. That's how I'm building my Backdrop sites now, because we don't have field blocks. you know, it's like this is a view with these 3 fields, drop it in here. This is a view with 2
Gotcha.
fields, drop it in here.
And that kind of brought up for me. Oh yeah, so then yeah, blocks would go into regions, regions would go into layouts, and so you could have like a teaser, full, whatever. Which I really like that because we're reusing some ideas we have in another UI, so it feels more cohesive and all that. So one thing it brought up for me was I've frequently, as a newer Drupal user back in the day, I wanted to have a block inside the node, but it's in like the page level, and I had to like try to jimmy rig it into the node level, and making that easy. So like how the like if you have an article page and the way the layout works, you want like a list of articles at the bottom and then the comments or something. I don't know. I'm just like kind of spitballing like a weird idea, but being able to kind of put things that aren't just from the node in the node's display seems to be useful sometimes, but I know that's weird.
Well, that's only weird because we come from Drupal. We don't do it that way.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I have a use case right now with this site where we like embed all sorts of kinds of stuff inside the body. But that's naughty. It has a whole bunch of issues with like performance and rendering and whatever, filtering and everything else. But it is like the use case there is valid, where it's like sometimes you want to put an ad in the middle of your content, or you want to put a promotion for another part of your website, or you want to show a list of related articles. And if you could do that using a mini layout, right, where it's like this is what my full node looks like, it has content on the left and ad on the right, or this is what my teaser looks like, and it has image on the left, text on the right, or however you want to do it. There is a use case for that. And I think that now that we have layouts that control the page level, we could definitely reuse that user interface for node view modes, or any entity view mode, I suppose, to do that. It gets hard. I think in the way that we are doing pages and layouts, and Nate, correct me that I'm wrong, we render like each block individually and then still concatenate strings. But the way that we render nodes, we actually have like a renderable item, like an array, that we flatten.
Right.
And so the two kind of models there are a little bit different. And I'm not sure that we want to concatenate strings in nodes. I mean, there was a huge movement to move away from concatenating strings in Drupal to try and make everything renderable, and we're kind of trying to say we'll render the things that need to be rendered, but we're going to flatten strings in places where we don't need to render things like the entire page, which is why layouts concatenate strings. But I don't know what that would do to kind of move back. That I don't know what the implications are one way or the other.
Yeah, I think we're kind of getting off the mark as far as the otherwise concerned. This is a kind of interesting idea, though, Wes, that that you'd be able to put other stuff in content that as if it were a field, basically. So be able to place blocks or something like that within a node.
Or views.
It's kind of thinking of the node, the node's view mode as more of a mini panel than the way we generally think of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that it's all possible. It's going to take a lot of work. Right now, our layouts are assumed to be page level because they've got stuff like page title and tabs and all of this stuff in there. We need to come up with a separate concept for like
mini layouts.
A mini layout. Yeah, exactly. So a mini layout template actually would be different than a page layout template because right now that's all that we have. And that would be kind of interesting. But then you get into a whole nother mess of complexity, like from a user mentality, that this panel is inside of, or this layout is inside of this other layout. It could be a real brain bender. And then what happens if you start wanting to put stuff like, a node field into the right sidebar, but the sidebar is not, the sidebar is at the page level, not the node level. things.
Okay, question. So we're come to this place where, and this happens all the time in Drupal, where there's like 5 models that match what it is that we're trying to do. Like we have, you can put blocks in a node, you can put new views in a node, or you can use mini layouts inside a layout. I was thinking about this yesterday and trying to figure out if there was a way that we could simplify our concepts. And this might not be something we can do in Backdrop 1, maybe it's something we need to do in Backdrop 2. But something like making there one way to create a page, and that's only a layout, so like getting rid of the views page display. And then trying to say there's only one way you can create a block, and that's either like a or I don't know, like whatever it is, like either you type content into it and that's like a content block, or you build it with views. And I think that if we can kind of remove the number of concepts and the number of ways there are to do things, it will make it a lot easier from a user experience standpoint, also make it a little less flexible, which could be a downside.
I don't know.
But there is a way where we could say, like, okay, if we just said you can put views, like do a hook field, extra fields thing with views in field UI, and so you can put views inside your nodes. That might, and we can give a visual representation of like the layout of the node, whether it's just a vertical list or we do somehow allow like node layouts or whatever. I don't know if we want to go down that path. But we could solve this problem by saying, go to your layouts page, create a variant for your node type, put in your node body on the left, or your node content, whatever it is. But node content consists of 4 fields in a view. Or something. That might be enough of like if you want to put a thing and the other thing you use a view is always the answer, might be the way to do it. And then now you have a block that represents node content, you have a block that represents fields, or you have blocks that represent views. But that's kind of it. I mean, I'm not even sure we need a block that represents fields. It could be a default view or something. But you know, it's just like trying to remove the possible ways to do number of possible ways to do things, and enforcing like either by setting defaults or something like this is the way we do this in Backdrop would kind of help create. I mean, maybe we can even do this through documentation. I don't know, but help create kind of like a guided path. Like this is the path most followed.
Yep.
And then if people want to do crazy things, they can. But at least it's like your instructions are consistent. Always use a view, always use a block. Put it in the page level, and you know, maybe field UI, the display tab goes away entirely, and it just says do that in layout.
Yeah, it's definitely part of the difficulty of the Drupal learning curve is the lack of strong, opinionated ways of doing things. Sometimes just be
too many options.
Too much, and it's like. If you talk, then you know, I come to Lullabot, right, and I talk to like a couple themers, and then they make me realize how simple things can be done, and it's just like, I wish I knew this 3 years ago. Like I thought I was, you know, really proficient in Drupal, and now I'm like, wow, I can do this a lot better than I am doing.
I still feel like that.
Yeah.
Like every day you're like, oh, that's an interesting way.
They're just like, yeah, you just use this module, and then you can use core functionality, and it's fine. And it's like, oh my god, it's just like 3 things, and they have a workflow, and it works. Yeah.
Well, guys, we're running out of time. We've only got like 10 minutes left. Maybe we should wrap up Field UI and talk about the remaining
Talk about
things.
it again next meeting. If this is a hard problem, I love, Wes, the work that you've done on already, and like all the thought that's going into it. I definitely think you're going in the right direction. But yeah, let's skip stuff. Okay, so let's see. There's other stuff we need to work on for Backdrop the product. Most of it, I'm super excited about the next release being a user experience release. So I have put a link in the agenda for all issues that are scheduled for 1.3.0, and those will probably continue to get pared down as we get closer to that mark. But I think just getting a whole bunch of stuff in that improves that will be huge. And so I'll just leave the Backdrop the product section at that. Anyone who's curious about what we're working on, go check that tag. Backdrop the website is kind of in stasis right now. I spent a bunch of time trying to actually use it last week and realized that we do really need to get those development tasks done for getting like links to GitHub exposed to where we can actually print them on the page. So I'll try and prioritize that. But otherwise, I think we're kind of on hold in terms of design there. Under swag, we have a t-shirt and a hoodie that we're getting made for Bad Camp. Oh, is that my computer that's ringing? Okay, sorry everyone. I hate Google Plus. Why does it ring your phone when you're on your phone? Anyway. Okay, so we have a tentative t-shirt. We don't have designs yet, but we have an idea where we're going to try and do this heather white colored shirt, which is like a little dappled color, which is really pretty. I wore another shirt today. I thought it was the same color, but it was way too big, so I changed it. But our plan is to put a smallish dragon kind of right in the middle so that his head will be popping out of your hoodie if you're wearing a hoodie and it's open or half zipped. If we turn that over to Darius, we should be getting designs soon. And then the most exciting thing is the hoodie, which we just kind of, I came up with this idea when I saw this dragon in our first round of revisions. I'm like, oh my god, that dragon needs to be giant and on the back of a hoodie. So we're going to try and get those done too. We're going to put him on the back, and then on the front we're going to try and either have it say Backdrop, which would be our word mark, or Backdrop CMS. So I'm really excited about both of those. I think we should try and figure out like a price to try and take donations in exchange for turning them out. I was thinking it might be good of us to do a similar price to Bad Camp, since we're going to be selling them at Bad Camp and we don't want to be trying to like undercut them on cost. So what I thought we would do is do t-shirts for $25 and hoodies for $50. At Bad Camp, I think it's t-shirts for $25, and then they have like a mid-level sponsorship for $50, which includes a solar-powered charged phone recharger, which I think is going to be pretty cool. And then they have a hoodie at $100 level. But since we don't have a middle level, I figured we could probably use that $50 price point for our hoodies. So I'm hoping that will work for people. For the t-shirts, we wanted to give those away for free to contributors. So that's anyone who has participated in any Backdrop issue or donated design services or been involved with Backdrop in any way so far. I think that can also include at the Backdrop Summit. If we can get new contributors there, they should earn their t-shirts, and that's totally fine. The hoodies cost us significantly more, which is why I was wondering how we should handle contributors with hoodies. But I thought maybe we could offer some kind of discount. So if you're a contributor, you get a free t-shirt and a cheaper hoodie, or do you think we should make everybody buy the hoodies?
Yeah, I kind of feel like we should just make people buy the hoodies.
Okay.
I mean, if you're already giving them free t-shirts, that seems adequate.
Okay.
And most of the time, most of our contributors are kind of like, oh, good, they're kind of looking for an excuse to give us money rather than, feeling like they deserve a free hoodie,
Okay. Well, I think that's totally fair, and that way we'll not lose money, even after giving away all of our free t-shirts. So I think that's good.
And that is pretty important. We do have, we're not Bad Camp. We don't have a $100,000 budget.
Yet. Okay. So that was, I think, the only thing that was super time sensitive is that we need to get these designs done by October 1st, which is next week, and then we'll start the printing. So I think if you watch this video and you really want a t-shirt or a hoodie, you can pre-order them through our website. I'll make sure we have a hoodie option up there as well. And then we'll adjust our order accordingly if we get pre-orders. So exciting. All right, nothing else new, I don't think, since our last design call.
No, I don't think so. I think we better wrap it up so that we can get organized for the general meeting. Yeah.
All right, well, thanks for all of the intensive field UI talk, and we will see you shortly.
All right, bye guys. Thanks, Wes. Thanks, Jen.
Bye.